The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's webinar on transitioning to a new normal. Several months ago, OPRA shifted our usual professional development series to focus on our response to COVID. Some of the webinar content and resources that we published at the time focused on resilience. It focused on how we respond and responded to that particular crisis. We looked at webinar content around working remotely and how to manage effectively a workforce remotely. Today, we're still in the midst of COVID-19, one of the largest pandemics we've ever faced. But in recent weeks, our client base across Asia Pacific, as well as OPRA as an organisation, has started to shift our focus. And that focus is on what this transition might mean to us as individuals, as teams, as organisations, to something that is different. It is a new norm. Today, we are delighted to have three industry experts across Asia Pacific, across OPRA's client base, talk today and share their journey, share their experiences, their insights, learnings, and the initiatives that they are undertaking now and plan to over the coming months and years as they transition to this new norm. Today is going to be a 1 hour webinar. It's reasonably conversational and casual and informal in nature. What we would encourage you to do is to pay attention, ask questions throughout as they come to mind, and we'll aim to answer those questions at the completion of the webinar. We'll aim to have about 45 minutes listening to these three very well-educated and experienced thought leaders, and then we'll aim to have about 15 minutes Q&A. Today we'll aim to share the slides and the recorded webinar as well. So if you've missed something, then it'll be coming your way. Or if you want to share this as well, by all means do that as well. A little bit about OPRA Psychology Group. We're established in 1997. We're an organisational psychology firm with an Asia Pacific footprint. And today it's really quite exciting to hear from a leading organisation in New Zealand, one in Australia and one in Singapore, both are which industry experts and global brands. So very, very exciting. Our purpose has always been quite simple, and over the past few months, this purpose has really shone from our perspective. In the face of a global pandemic, it's all about providing inspirational solutions to teams and organisations so that we can be the best we can. We did this through 5 main service arms: selecting talent through psychometric assessments, assessment centres, developing talent through onboarding, leadership development programs, enterprise-wide technology solutions, through surveying, entry, exit, staff engagement, and recently an increase in pulse surveys focusing on wellbeing and engagement. We provide training and accreditation to organisational development, learning development and safety specialists, so that there's a transfer of our IP and the assessment solutions that we have. And finally, we look at our research or analyse arm, where we want to understand the return on investment or detailed insights regarding programs that organisations are running. I'm going to be your facilitator today. My name is Ben Hainsworth. I'm the General Manager for Australia. I commenced my career in behaviour management and have Asia Pacific experience ranging from sport and organisational psychology. And very, very pleased to head up the Australian operations, which currently includes 8 offices across this large country, alongside 3 offices in New Zealand and 1 in Singapore. As I said, today we're very excited, extremely fortunate to have 3 industry experts and 3 global brands share with us today their insights, their journey, and what their thoughts are on transitioning to a new normal. Jill Fairweather is Head of Learning and Development at WesTrac, one of the largest Caterpillar distributors globally. Jill is the Head of L&D and is a teacher by trade. She has extensive local and international teaching experience and has worked with some of Australia's largest construction, mining, engineering and resource companies in national learning and development, as well as talent roles. Jill specialises in identifying development capabilities in teams and individuals and supporting them through leadership models and effective training tools to build their capability and personal development growth. Her approach to learning and development recognises that all changes in culture and behaviour begin with changing how people see themselves, others, and the world around them. Thank you again, Jill, for being a part of today.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, good afternoon.
We're covering a few time zones today.
Yeah.
Ian Saunders, Acting General Manager for Training. He's a psychologist and also one of the few individuals who combines being a detective with those other two titles as well. Ian's an experienced leader with a demonstrated performance history of working effectively in the law enforcement, training, and organisational psychology industries. Ian's skilled in delivering strong leadership in many contexts: cultural change, coaching, government, emergency management, law enforcement, and change management. He has a strong human resource, training, workforce, education, and professional background. He graduated from Massey University with a Master of Arts with honours, has a postgraduate diploma in organisational psychology, is a registered industrial psychologist, and is a qualified detective in New Zealand. Ian, thank you very much for being a part of today. Christian Frederickson is the Head of Human Resources, Project and Development Services, Asia Pacific for JLL. Christian is an organisational psychologist with a passion for evidence-based people strategies. Christian has been the Head of HR for JLL for 2 years. He's a strategic and commercial HR and organisational development leader with experience across HR, business partnering, Centre of Excellence, and management consulting roles. JLL is a leading professional service firm that specialises in real estate and investment management. It's a Fortune 500 company with over 80,000 employees whose vision is to reimagine the world of real estate, creating rewarding opportunities and amazing spaces where people can achieve their ambitions. Jill, Ian, Christian, thank you very much for being part of today. And we're thrilled to have you on board and very much look forward to hearing from you. So really what we're wanting to do is to shift our focus as we emerge from crisis management to looking at what we're going to be doing in a transition to a new norm as individuals, ourselves, the teams that we manage and the organisations that we work for. Before we get underway, I'm really keen just to have a bit of more context around each of the organisations that you work for and the experience that you've had over the past few months. Jill, if you can give a bit more context around WesTrac.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, what we do at WesTrac is we sell those big yellow machines that you might see on mine sites. So we are one of Caterpillar's largest dealers, and we're based here in Western Australia, New South Wales, and the ACT as well. In the West, we have about 2,000 employees that are metropolitan based and also based in our different regions. As you know, WA is a very, very big state. And in New South Wales, we've probably got around about 1,500 people based around New South Wales and also the ACT. So what we do, it is really quite simple. We sell a lot of equipment. We've got about 300 different models of Caterpillar equipment that we sell. We have a 24/7 parts service that sells parts to our customers, and then also we service machinery as well. And we service that machinery both again here in Perth, but also in our regions up north where our mine sites are based. Just to give you a bit of a context, I guess, where I fit into the picture. So as head of L&D, we've got about 40 people in our L&D team, and we're part of our HR team where we've got about 80 people supporting the business. We've got some people that, like myself, work in national roles across the two WesTrac dealerships, because we have the WesTrac dealership in New South Wales, and then the rest of our sort of P&C team just support our WA people. So I guess the experiences I'll talk today will be around what we've done within the West. New South Wales had obviously a slightly different approach with what's happened with the numbers as well with COVID.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill. And over the past few months, has there been any sort of unique shift in the industry or with WesTrac in relation to COVID?
Yeah, we've actually been very lucky because we are considered mining services with the government. We've been considered an essential service. So we're in a really fortunate position at WesTrac where we've been able to keep operating and we haven't had some of the doom and gloom stories that, we've heard globally around, people losing work. We've been able to keep our people on, which has been fantastic. And we've also been able to use it to actually find people within WA that were, a little bit less fortunate. I think one of our great stories is working with Qantas, who, we're based out near the airport here in the West, and we picked up about 25 mechanics from Qantas when all the planes got grounded. So for us, we know that we're very fortunate to be able to continue to be able to work and continue to work from, to be able to move our people to work from home as well, and continue our operations. And where we could, I guess we've also done what we could for the West Australian community as well. And being part of Seven Group Holdings, our CEO was on the news only a few weeks ago, sort of talking about the fact that we had 250 vacancies and we were open for business, and we wanted people to look into coming to work at WesTrac. And I think we, as well as the good news stories off the Qantas stories, like we've all been touched with family and friends that have been less fortunate, so people that have been made redundant. There have been we have a refer a friend sort of scheme here as part of our recruitment strategy, so there's been lots of opportunities for us to pick up different people to come and join WesTrac during this time.
Yeah, excellent. That certainly, I love the story around the transition of Qantas employees to WesTrac. So congratulations. And tell me, just in terms of the proportion of staff that worked remotely throughout that period, did you go into complete remote? Was it rostered? Was it what?
Yeah, we started. So we first of all just sort of did the transition, the trials really, like would our IT systems hold up if we all kind of worked from home? We did some trials, and then things were changing, almost by the hour. So we moved our teams that were the non-operational teams. So our operational teams have continued to go because you can't obviously fix a truck from home, not yet anyway. So our operational teams did stay working with social distancing, and quite strict rosters, and obviously added cleaning situations that we increased, but our support services and our office-based staff, which are around about probably 500 to 600 people, we moved them into two teams. So obviously our colours are black and yellow teams, and we moved actually into a really good roster. It was like a Thursday to Wednesday roster, so you were never at home for a whole week. You worked 1 week in the office, 1 week at home. And we did that for about 3 weeks before then everything sort of restrictions came in, and we then sent everybody into what we called the white team, and everybody worked from home. We're just transitioning back now into bringing everybody back into the office. And we've also had, I guess, the red team, which is very early on in the piece. We had some people that we considered priority either for their health reasons or the health reasons of their family members that they cared for. So they were considered our at-risk people. So before we even moved into our black and yellow teams, we moved those people home very quickly, and we're still, working with them to transition them back. But it was, probably around about 500 to 600 people that we moved to working from home for probably be about a 4-week period when we were all at home.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill. And just hearing those different colour schemes, WesTrac, from my experience, is one organisation that loves its colours. Its people talk about bleeding yellow. So
bleeding yellow. I was about to say, yes, we bleed yellow.
I can visualise that. Look, thank you for sharing. Look, from Perth, we might jump across to New Zealand. Ian, really keen to hear a little bit of context around New Zealand Police. What's been the experience over the past few months? Mindful that New Zealand globally was one of the first countries to go into full lockdown mode. What impacted that?
existence. So that turned out to be a lot more difficult than it sounds. So the first challenge was, I guess, shutting down what couldn't operate under level 4, and the second challenge was the operational environment and making sure our people were safe. Much like Jill, making sure that those that needed care were cared for, and there was a good dose of empathetic style and leadership that we were using across the business. That was really, really critical, and recognising that police officers, as much as we expect a lot of them in terms of courage, etc., they are still human beings with quite a different type of risk to the everyday risk of going to work, and that they were coming home, including my staff coming home, having been exposed potentially to the virus, and then having to satisfy the concerns at home. So it was a challenge for us, I guess. Some of the fear attached to COVID, which is not a often spoken about thing in policing, because it's kind of our stock and trade, is everyone's worst moments. It was a community-wide thing. So the fascinating thing for us, I guess, was the opportunities that emerged from it in terms of partnerships that in the past might have been fraught. It was a chance to actually engage the whole community, that common interest in looking after the general, the public health of our communities was a shared experience. So we're a PN-based police organisation, the community-based policing service, and so I think we were well set up for that in terms of partnerships. But we certainly learned a lot more about how, including in training, how to partner with some of our community members to make sure everyone felt safe. So it was a really interesting experience, not least because of the my team was we sit alongside what we call people capability, which includes a large HR branch. We're embedded there. The training institution is a little bit separate. Ours just north of the capital city, and we have about 386 staff, either on the campus plus recruits. At the time we had 140, I think, recruits, might have been shade more than that, in residence as well, and staff in every district in the country. So quite a large beast. 14,000 strong New Zealand police in total. So yeah, in my immediate sphere of concern, the 385 staff, both constabulary or police officers and non-constabulary trainers and designers and people who deliver things like firearm training, etc. So quite a spread out business in every town in New Zealand, more or less, or every district. A very wide responsibility for anything training. We try to be the provider of choice for New Zealand police in any training space, be it financial management right through to investigating homicide. So it's quite a wide business. And so yeah, it was a real interesting experience for me, I guess, leading as a police officer embedded in an HR team. It's kind of the first time I've been in a multi-management setting like that. So there's some lessons learned there across how we operate compared to business, both in terms of positive, how police officers operate, and some lessons learned from each party, I think. So interesting context for me as a police officer.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think no doubt you've had your challenges as a registered psychologist, detective, and heading up that functional unit. So thank you for sharing that context. Let's jump over to Singapore with Christian. For JLL, one of the largest real estate property investment organisations globally. What's the context for you over the past few months in terms of headcount and shift in just the organisation so far?
Yeah, hi Ben, hi everybody. JLL indeed one of the world's largest real estate services firms. So globally we have, as you said, over 90,000 staff. About half of those are in Asia Pacific, so 45,000 also across Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and therefore it's a large workforce. Here in Asia, we've got about 350 HR staff to support that workforce. And as a firm, we do two major sorts of work, if you like, two major divisions. The first is what you might think of as traditional real estate, so buying and selling or leasing office and commercial real estate. And the other major element of what we do is corporate services. So that includes things like design, building, construction and project management, but it also includes corporate services such as property and facility management. So we provide what you might consider frontline services for our clients' real estate portfolios. That includes things like reception, janitorial staff, engineering and maintenance folks, audiovisual folks who might work in the building and come in and sort out your webinar for you, those sorts of things. And so, you know, for us, one of our big challenges with the impact of COVID has been the fact that we've got such a dispersed workforce already. That's not necessarily working from home, although that is part of it, but the majority of our staff actually don't work in a JLL office. They work at our client sites in some of the roles I was mentioning before. So that brings a couple of challenges in this context, one of which is how do we put our arms around that workforce in the most effective way? How do we communicate with them clearly? And as you can probably assume by the sorts of roles they're doing, not all of them are sat in front of a computer all day. In fact, the majority are not. And secondly, they're in roles that our clients are looking to us to help them manage at least part of the COVID response, which is what are we doing around the physical workspace in terms of safety protocols, in terms of health considerations and so forth. So that's obviously caused us to respond really rapidly in both of those spheres. Firstly, on the employee care. You know, we have an office in Wuhan in China, which was sort of the outbreak, as everyone would know, the first point of outbreak. And clearly there was been, therefore, some phased responses. You know, China had a massive impact up front and the rest of the world was not so much. And then obviously that shifted and kind of moved across Asia. So we've had experience from those very early responses that's informed how we've responded in other locations, and how we respond to our clients' requirements as well has been something that we've really had to shift gears on, because they're asking questions that to a large degree they hadn't really asked before, such as what do I do in a global pandemic? And you know, we've engaged our research teams, we've engaged our operational teams to really, I hope, help those clients to do what they need to do to stay safe and to keep their operating businesses going.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. It's great to hear from frontline police officer through to mechanics working on, I think Jill said, big yellow trucks, and to hear that literally your workforce was at the forefront, at the face of this pandemic in Wuhan. I'm keen to dig a little bit deeper and sort of look at some of both the reflection and the learnings from your recent experience. Jill and Christian, sort of drawing from your experience there, what has been the shift in mindset? What's been challenged? How have people worked differently, and what does that look like? Maybe firstly, Jill.
I think for us at WesTrac, we're a very traditional company, and we do things, you know, we're deep in our history. We actually were celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, and all our anniversary celebrations got shut down due to COVID. But we kind of do things, we've got the attitude that, you know, we get things done and we do things, you know, even some of our deals are all sort of face-to-face, our training, it's all face-to-face. So the biggest mindset I think that we have seen is that being able to work flexibly, because even though we are one of Caterpillar's biggest dealers, we are dealing with a smaller market because we're dealing only within Australia at the moment. So I guess we're a little bit limited, and you know, Perth as well, it's another, you know, sort of isolated place, or WA is. So we've had to really challenge the way we actually work and being able to work from home. But I think as a result of it, it definitely, you know, we kept on looking at the silver linings of what happened when we first sort of started dealing with it. And you know, every conversation you had with somebody was only about COVID in those early days, because there was nothing else to talk about, both professionally and personally. But it brought a sense of community, I definitely felt, with our teams, because we had to connect very quickly. You know, as Christian said, you know, giving those sort of virtual hugs with our team members that we couldn't see. And I think also as leaders, you're also dealing with the emotions that everybody was facing. And, you know, you had the people that were watching all the reports every single day on the news and coming in and, you know, the world is going to end and it's doom and gloom and we're going to lose our jobs. And then you had the people that were like, oh, it's not going to hit us, you know. So you had that, I guess, the two extremes of the types of people that you were, you know, dealing with. So moving them into working from home and then having to connect to them, I think definitely made people think differently, like, yeah, this is actually possible. And particularly for a very traditional workforce, even, you know, our trainers, we were getting them to train from home. And, you know, we used Teams, Microsoft Teams predominantly. And, you know, we did some trials where they could train from home and have students, you know, dialing in on mobile phones or mobile devices to learn at the same time. And I think, again, the silver lining for us has been it's forced us to use technology better. And I think we're going to continue to do that going forward, particularly as we try and work with our regional community. So, again, we're very quick to fly people down, you know, for face-to-face meetings, etc. But we know that I think it could be probably more, obviously, cost-effective and efficient to look at technology. So, yeah, it's a mindset change in the way that we work, but we don't want to lose that now and go straight back into the way that it was. I think, you know, we've got to look at what COVID has done and the impact has had, and for all the sadness and the tragedy that it's caused globally, there's also some learnings that I think that we can all take from it.
Yeah, excellent, Jill. I was talking to a client during the week, and they've been astounded by how much they've saved in terms of travel costs. So, not surprising that that remote fly in, fly out workforce has been affected. Christian, back to you. You mentioned this virtual hug, which I love that term, sort of wrapping your arms around the workforce. Tell me, did they respond differently to that? Did they respond how you thought they would respond?
I think the response that we had from our employees has been really quite tremendous and really quite inspiring. I think one of the, I mean, Jill talked about silver linings. One of the silver linings, I think, has been seeing how much of a positive impact that we can have and make a difference to our clients and the people generally that work for us and provide services to our clients. It's been really, really inspiring. I mean, a number of very difficult circumstances, particularly in those early days where sites that were required to shut down by government regulations, and in some parts, for example, in India, we might be doing a construction or a project management task, and they often include accommodation for the workforce near the project site. If that project site shuts down, which many of them did, we then had to respond really quickly to not only help those folks stay safe and follow all the right kind of health and sanitary guidelines, but to move them, because we moved them there to do the work, move them out and keep the technology running. Really reflect with a lot of pride on what we can achieve. I think, and one of the things that we've done as well is survey our employees, try to talk to them as much as we can, get their feedback. How are they feeling? They're telling us that they're pleased with the response that JLL as a firm has provided to the crisis, both to them and to our clients, obviously. And, you know, that's through a number of initiatives that perhaps we'll talk about, you know, later in the call, around things like well-being and focusing on people as our number one priority, and obviously clients as well. And a moment where, in all honesty, shareholders are probably third in line on that list of priority, which is something that I think people are recognizing and say, you know, this is a firm that we're trying to get the people aspect right first and foremost.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Christian, for sharing that. It's great to sort of see the priority of people, and often where shareholders vote is number one. The pecking order is a little bit different at the moment. Thank you for sharing. Ian, I'm keen to hear from you, both as a leader and your organisation. What were the key lessons that you firstly have learned personally?
Personally, I'm a very introverted leader, so it's quite complicated to be a psychologist and a police officer and be introverted. So, as a leadership style, I have definitely got a my doors always closed philosophy. But the virtual environment, I found it was a really interesting lesson for me, how much I learned about my staff through virtual meetings, because we had what we call a incident management team, which is our immediate response team. We would normally run for a police operation of any sort of scale, and we're meeting them twice a day, running really active decision logs to externalise all our thinking, but just being forced into the presence of your staff every day, often in my lounge, and them seeing how horrible my dog grooming skills are, all those sort of things, which I try and keep a real distance from staff for a whole lot of reasons. But they're right in your living room. I learned to dislike my dogs intensely, all those sort of things you learn about yourself, which are different. But yeah, introversion for me was a challenge as a leader, because I was actually forced to be a lot more available online. It just is. It felt like it's quite paradoxical, I suppose. The online environment I felt was a lot more accessible to my staff, and they were able to see if I was online and working through WebEx and just really access me really readily. Well, that's whether they're at home. So I've got a massive WebEx board in my office. It's a great tool, but it means it's like a window to your office, always open during your operating hours. So that was a challenge for me. I think I found that quite interesting and very tiring. So I needed a little more discipline around myself here, and making sure I took time out and got away and did things which are harder to do, like get to the gym or do things to get a break. So I had to really refocus myself on that, because I found that quite tiring. A couple of lessons were always spouted on about in coaching others, but learning to, when you've got a lot of decisions to make as a leader in a very fast changing environment, to just trust yesterday's self a little bit. Make sure you really trust your decisions. And we often talk here about trusting the quality of our decisions to overwhelm the circumstances we find ourselves in. That's a really important tenet I think we applied here. Really, it was actually on our whiteboard in our management team space, about making sure that we just didn't ruminate over what we did yesterday. We kept records of that, but we really trusted who we were yesterday to do a good job and just back ourselves. Our decisions overwhelm the circumstances, and that keeps you focused on process. I think what's in front of you and the information you have in front of you. We learned a lot from the operation in Christchurch, the mosque murders that happened in Christchurch City in March last year. An awful lot from them around the quality of decision making with groups under stress. So when we were managing that operation, we learned the value of a pre-mortem, and making sure, particularly in technical space, that leadership groups, you were never trying to brief them on horribly technical information that wasn't already known to them in a plan or had been discussed with them, because like stressed people, stressed groups have very poor working memories and all that sort of stuff. It's very hard to brief. So the overarching thing I learned most, I guess, is the importance of a plan. Planning is super important to manage your organisation's response to disruption, and that means when we picked up our pandemic plan about 4 weeks before we closed, it was a very high level. It was something we said we had, but it was very lacking in informative detail that a leader could use under pressure to do things like to close a whole police college, for example, which is an unusual response, or to brief people on the risks associated with pandemics. So the importance of planning was super important. So good self-care, trust who you were yesterday, otherwise you tie yourself up in knots. And the importance of pre-mortems, like analysing what could go wrong in your future decisions while you're making them and while you're planning. That's, I think.
Excellent, and thank you so much for sharing. It was great just to hear, sort of looking at that level of flexibility that WesTrac had to demonstrate and to live and breathe. I think hearing Christian's comments just around how to prioritize. What were the key things? Was it shareholder or was it employee support? And then to hear about your pre-mortem following the Christchurch tragedy, possibly the learnings from that has positioned New Zealand Police, if not the country, to possibly be more proactive and better positioned to manage major change. So with that in mind, thank you for sharing that sort of reflection. I'm keen to sort of look at building on those insights and look at how you're shifting your focus. We've heard lots of things around the only consistent thing at the moment or in life is change. I've forgotten the number of times I've heard the word pivot. So maybe just looking a little bit more into this transition and change. Jill, maybe to you, what is the new norm for WesTrac?
As I said before, I think the new norm is looking at things a little bit differently. It's been an opportunity to figure out what our priorities are and what we need to be working on. And I think because we've been communicating in a different way, we've probably been more effective and more efficient. Flexibly. From an L&D perspective, it's as I said, it's really pushed us forward around using technology a lot more and the way that we actually train. Even though we've got one whole group that trains in technology and on the autonomous trucks, and that's a very exciting space to be in. But I think it's also the way we train, so that face-to-face delivery over maybe some theory being delivered by teams or more online assessments or prerequisite learning, particularly for our apprentices. We have in WA about 450 apprentices that come through our institute training doors at the moment. About 127 of those are our own WesTrac ones, so that's a lot easier obviously to get those people in the door because most of them are based here in Perth. But for our external customers who've got their apprentices based all around the state, it's definitely forced us to think differently about what this new way of doing things will be, and it's created a change and brought through a change that if we'd probably implemented would have probably taken us a lot longer to do. So we've had to definitely adapt. And I think my own team, I have a fantastic group of people. I have lots of options. So definitely looking at ways of doing things more effectively within the training space.
Excellent, thank you. It's great to hear those initiatives coming out around just that technology being used way more efficiently to support that remote training. Thank you, Christian. Just to swing to you here in terms of say the new norm in terms of maintaining that communication. I love that term before, that sort of virtual hug. What does it look like in terms of that phase that you're currently in, and how is that shifting, or has it already shifted by the sounds of it?
I think it has, and I think with the ability now to work remotely for the majority of our folks, I mean, we at a point in time, as I said, it varies depending on when you take the measure, but over 90% of our workforce working remotely. And I think if you had asked our executive team 6 months ago, would it be possible for 90% of the firm to work from home at the same time? They would have said no, and are you crazy? But it's proven to be possible. I think what we are, we're obviously a real estate firm, so we're not sort of making bold statements necessarily. What we are trying to do is listen to our employees, and I think the data that we're seeing is showing that the vast majority do want to return to the office in some shape or form. And I think the new norm is not going to be everybody work from home all of the time. I think the new norm is going to be how we think about the most effective and efficient uses of corporate real estate and uses of our office space. With the pandemic, the working from home and the ability to put people remotely and have them work in a dispersed way, that's worked, that's been successful because it's had to work. We haven't had a choice. It's had to work because of restrictions in most of the world. That's not the same as saying that's the optimal solution for everybody all of the time. And to a large degree, the impacts on things like productivity and the impacts on things like commercial and financial outcomes is unproven, and will be difficult, in fact, to tease out the impact of remote working on commercial outcomes because of all the confounding variables in the crisis. So we're adopting a bit of a wait and see approach, but I think what we're absolutely focused on as the new normal and as a strategy is as people come back to the office, perhaps they don't come back to the office in the same way. Perhaps we can be really thoughtful about the best use of that physical space and how we use it to drive a better employee experience and better productivity. So I think that's the opportunity, and that's something that we're giving a tremendous amount of thought to at the moment.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Christian. Great to be able to sort of see that accordion effect of 90% stretched out to remote through to bringing that back in, given what the employee demand is like. Ian, I'm keen to sort of learn from you in terms of your commentary before around your own leadership style. Thank you for sharing that. I'd be keen to understand not just your relationship with your dog or what people are looking now into your living room more and more, given virtual collaboration, but what's NZ Police doing now, and what will they be doing more in the future to support leaders?
Yeah, well, we just had a really timely transition. A new commissioner began just during the closure, so a new leadership vision, not a whole sea change, but a change in commissioner. And we used the close down period to really push a digital first strategy to reach our leaders. What we've gone through in police is a very large growth, a 20% growth in our front line in the last 3 years has been remarkable investment. It means that we have a very early service front line. So our delivery of service in big metropolitan areas like Auckland City, most of those staff are under 2 years service. And so the leadership demand for them, they're very hungry for leadership development. And the scale of that means that our traditional sort of paramilitary training model doesn't work. We're a cohort model of 20 people coming at a time and have a very bespoke sort of residential, introspective experience as a trainee on site. It's not feasible, nor I don't think it's the right thing to do anymore. Because what we did there, we did 20, an average service for a leader on the front line can be very long. So they could sit in their role for 15, 20 years, and they've used a cohort model of training and certification, they never train again. So digital first is what we've used, investing in podcasting and different educational tools and reaching people. And we've used the period of lockdown to trial the podcasting acceptance, and we had amazing feedback I didn't expect. So from our senior leaders on the front line saying they felt like they've redone their sergeant's training just in their car at night when they're driving on a night shift at a high quality level through podcasting and things I wouldn't have. So I've never watched a podcast myself in my life until the lockdown when I was asked to deliver podcasting. So it's pushed us to be different and reach people in a different way and move to a digital first technology, such that in July that went so well during lockdown, and we condensed those learnings because of the need, the demand. It was necessary. we're launching a completely different approach to leadership training, which is a distance learning package, digital first, broadcast, so you have choice for the learner, so they can come to a centre or they can learn from home. So that's quite a transformation for us with a long history of several decades of that sort of military model of training, which has been completely challenged by COVID.
Excellent. That's really, really insightful just to hear that user experience. And we're certainly seeing a lot of organisations prior to COVID, but I think accelerated through COVID, looking for that scalable enterprise technology-led and self-led talent solution. So really interesting to hear that police officers on shift are now upskilling and feeling as though they're more skilled than ever. Sort of takes us to look a little bit more at some of those opportunities and how we are moving forward. So thank you for sort of kicking things off there. Jill, Christian, in terms of key initiatives that you've now put in place that were accelerated by COVID-19, are there any sort of absolute standouts for you?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. Definitely, I think for us, the big one here is the huge focus on well-being. So it's been a strategic priority for a little while, but has been massively accelerated by the COVID pandemic. And that's the focus on helping our employees think about their own well-being and to focus on that in a number of different ways. So we sort of think about 4 pillars of well-being. We think about physical, mental and financial well-being, as well as inclusion as a real pillar of well-being as well. We have very quickly got up and running a portal, an internal portal that's accessible by all 90,000 of our staff globally. That is kind of the central repository for information, for links and for resources on all of those 4 pillars. We've rolled out webinars and virtual learning programs around specific topics on well-being. So stress management, building resilience and topics of that nature, which has been extremely well received. And we've also done some other things in particular in Asia Pacific, which are fairly new for us as a firm, and that is EAP, so our Employee Assistance Program. In a little bit of an embarrassing way, that wasn't something prior to COVID that we had available across the region, only in certain countries. Now I'm very happy to say that it's EAP support's available to every one of our Asia Pacific employees, no matter which country that they are in. And we've also struck up an agreement with the Headspace app. So we're providing that complimentary to all our staff so that they can access it to get those external resources through the Headspace app. That's a big thing for them. So well-being is a huge pillar, but also I think just to sort of build on something Ian was talking about a moment ago on our learning and development approach. And I think to kind of paraphrase what Ian said, or to make it a parallel with what we've experienced, the crisis has sort of been able to give us a bit of a kickstart into a more contemporary way of thinking about adult learning and adult development. And the opportunity, I think, there is to consider online learning and the way in which e-learning is delivered as a real asset, not as a, oh, if I can't do it face-to-face, then I guess I'll do it online, but perhaps a more contemporary way of thinking about it. My sort of brain goes to let's be really thoughtful about the evidence for that, because I think at the moment there's a bit of a sugar hit, right? We put out these e-learning courses, and I was on one the other day. We had 1,200 people done. It was a huge course. We were expecting a few people. We had 1,200 dial into it, and you look at those numbers and you go, yeah, we're nailing this. We're getting so many people these e-learning modules. I think it's then saying, how do we measure the impact of that? How can we be sure that these sort of learning and development solutions are doing what we want them to do, transfer of learning, behaviour change, etc. I'm confident that they are going to achieve those things, but it's about, do we consider thinking the measurement of outcomes in a different way as well? So I think, yeah, those are the 2 things I would talk about: well-being and how we've responded in L&D.
Yeah, excellent. Tell me, I'm keen to sort of just tap in. We've got a lot of HR, L&D, OD and registered psychologists dialing in today. As an organisational psychologist, how How has that shift made you feel?
Very positive overall. I mean, I think well-being in particular is something that for a long while was sort of considered, is this really part of what an organisation should be doing? I mean, we're here to, particularly, you know, in the sphere I work in, which is obviously a for-profit enterprise, you know, the purpose of the firm is many things, but certainly one of them is to achieve financial returns for our shareholders. And does well-being come into that? Is that something that we should be doing as a firm? I think for me, this pandemic making it very clear that it is absolutely something that we should be doing very strongly and very proactively, you know, has made me really, really pleased and proud that that's the case.
Excellent. Thank you. It sounds like there's a real sort of rebranding and positioning in terms of employee value proposition for JLL, which is great. So thank you very much for sharing. Jill, keen similarly to sort of understand some of the initiatives that you've driven with WesTrac, and what are the long-term implications for engagement, well-being, shareholder return? What are your views on that?
I think, you know, in regards to what Christian was saying from like the L&D perspective, I think it definitely, you know, as I said, it's pushed us into a space that very quickly, which has been really good. It's been a really steep learning curve, but, you know, there's definitely lessons for us to learn and progress to be made in that space. Even simply down to, you know, even how we can automate things or make things more effective. During COVID, we were right in the midst of our recruitment for our next intake of apprentices, which started in August, and we usually have, this time we had 900 people apply for 25 positions. And again, it's a very hands-on process. We have them in for a couple of days doing skills assessments, you know, site tours, and then being able to then go and then interview and then offer. So we've had to totally turn that around and use, you know, even for our skills test, we've used gamification, mechanical tests that we've been using, which we're now going to continue as well. Like, we've always had the psychometric testing, but what we've been able to see is being able to still engage a number of people to then get that final sort of number down. And then we will be conducting interviews, hopefully face to face, but that will be that sort of first sort of contact. So we've had to do things differently. So we've been out videoing our current apprentices, sort of doing the day in life sort of videos. We've been using VR sort of technology around doing tours as well, so that, you know, so that people at the time weren't able to actually come to our premises. We sort of stopped all external people coming in our doors, being able to use that sort of technology as well. So, and again, it's excited us. I think, like, we're really looking at different and more effective ways, you know, to do things. In regards to the wellbeing, I totally agree with what Christian is saying. It's that fine line between where do we get involved and where do we not get involved as an organisation. And I think what's been fantastic about WesTrac is how much engagement we've had across the business through all our leaders. So, you know, similar obviously to Ian, we had an IMT and CMT group that met very, very regularly. We then also had our CEO dialing up with our leaders, you know, on a daily, sometimes daily, now weekly basis, giving the information directly from him of what was going on for us then to convey that to our teams. And then we were then communicating with our teams constantly, and it was different ways of communicating. So, you know, using text messages, using videos, using email, sending letters to families at home as well, to keep that connection going. And I think from all those different tools and ways of communicating, we're definitely looking at continuing that on, so that our people have got more access to everybody across the company, you know, right from the CEO to their leaders. So yeah, we've been very fortunate. We've had a really strong comm strategy, you know, right through it, and a very highly planned IMT and CMT group, so that, heaven forbid, you know, if there's some other pandemic or something like that, then, you know, we're definitely ready and can look into that, because our planning prior to that, you know, was obviously in the industry that we work in. You know, it's a dangerous industry, so we were, our crisis management training is always sort of focused on injuring sort of one person or a few people, or the other threat we always talk about is, a plane crash, because we're so close to the airport and the planes fly straight over our premises. But, the unprecedented times where it's been a challenge, because no matter how much training you can do on crisis management, when it's, globally affecting everybody, I think it's been a really good learning for everybody, but it's provided a different type of connection. It's been quite funny because we've all started to filter back into the office as of yesterday, and lots of people are like, oh, I'm gonna have to work from home, it's really noisy, so we initially, when we were seeing each other, it was like, oh, fantastic, great to see everyone, and now it's the reality of like all the noise and the buzz of, and getting back into, particularly in open workspaces, what that sort of looks like. So yeah, we're transitioning back slowly, but we'll definitely get there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Jill. I love that that quote. COVID's excited and accelerated those changes. So thank you for sharing. We've got 5 minutes or so, and sort of wouldn't mind getting people to sort of think about some questions that they want the panel to respond to. And just whilst you're thinking up some juicy questions there, similar to Christian, OPRA has also put together a resource library which is open for public consumption. So feel free, if there's anything today from resources, one-pages on best practice methodologies to return, to communicate, work remote, you name it. We've been very keen to support our client base and the local broader community, just in terms of what we can share. There's also some fantastic resources from the Australian Psychological and the NZ equivalent societies, as well as Beyond Blue. So we'll share this today, but feel free to go to the OPRA website, where we've openly produced and encourage those shared resources to be used internally. Look, some really, really fascinating insights. I could probably sit here for another hour or two, probably more, listening. But some of those things that I've just heard, for me, in this digital first training, which is seeing police officers in their cars at night learning, relearning, reskilling, is seriously exciting. So thank you for sharing. Look, I think, yeah, for me, the comment, Christian, around wrapping your arms around the staff virtually, I think is brilliant. And certainly a really, really good news story in Australia has been around how WesTrac has transitioned Qantas staff. So I think we're touching individuals positively, we're engaging, we're looking at things differently. So fascinating to hear some of your insights and what you're doing to transition to this new norm. Certainly open now to any questions that people want to put out there. And maybe just before we do that, maybe just sort of touching on that last sort of comment, Jill, and maybe opening it up to the other guys around this transition back, now that we're filtering back in quite rapidly. Are there any sort of things that you're wanting to sort of support or sort of limit in terms of how quick people are returning? Is it something that you want to see self-led, or a blanket rule on it? Jill, what's your thoughts on that?
So we have started transitioning back. So we actually brought back our technical training team as of this week. And we just had notification yesterday from our CEO that over the next sort of 2 weeks, we'll transition everyone back. We'll have everyone back in the office. I think it's the 15th of June. So if, as I said to my team, you've got, and tomorrow I'll be working from home for a week. So one more week of working with my slippers on, which I've got to say I've definitely enjoyed. And then we'll bring everybody back into the office. Like I said prior, the only ones that we are still considering is our priority people. And that will be dependent on their sort of current situations and what that looks like. Yeah, I think for me, it's the little things that you kind of miss when you're, celebrating somebody's birthday with, cutting a cake and only half the people can kind of eat it when they're not around. When you go to interview people and you're not shaking hands with people, or you're, trying to give somebody a hug for, a celebration or something like that. It's the little things that I think have definitely challenged us as well. So I think getting back to that norm eventually is definitely the way to go. It hasn't been comfortable with me, you know, the elbow tap or the toe tap as I've greeted people. It's not something that I've adapted, I have to say. So yeah, I think it's some of those little things that we just sort of take for granted, and being able to see people that we've, you know, definitely taken for granted. I think we're a lot more thankful for now as we transition back into that phase of getting everybody returning, but now allowing that flexibility and what that sort of looks like. And, you know, to Christian's point, it's not a case of everybody's now going to be working from home, but I think it's allowed people to think, yeah, this is possible. And I think it's also built the trust in teams as well, knowing that people are still being engaged even though they're working from home. And so what that looks like for them going forward. So I've definitely, you know, my team, we've definitely spoken about the fact that some people might have something, you know, set up sort of formally, and others will be like, you know, if I need some clear sort of headspace, or I'm in a strategy, you know, I'm doing a planning session or something like that, and I need some sort of quiet time, then you know, they'll look for working from home, you know, as they require. I think there are also lots of people that are also quite excited to come back to work as well, you know, dealing with all the other things that are going on in their personal lives. And I know a couple of my team members, I think their wives are quite happy that, you know, that they're coming back into the office, because I've heard their inside voices are not carried so well at home as well as sometimes in the office. So yeah, we've got a different mix of emotions, I guess, coming back into the office space.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Jill. Ian, I'm keen to sort of understand if there's any sort of current or future sort of policy that you think will change or be shaped differently because of COVID.
We've definitely learned quite a bit around flexibility of work space, like everybody else. For some roles, obviously, the delivery police service can't be done from home, but a lot of our support services, the productivity difference was almost nothing. So we're still learning from that. We're a little bit different, I guess, in that most or a lot of our staff have worked through the break. So what we're trying to do now as a return to a more normal community-wide state is actually resting our staff and having them take some leave because they've been working through. So it's actually a bit of a different situation with a lot of businesses where a lot of people have done long hours and worked in frontline roles and been apprehensive and all that sort of normal stuff. So giving them a rest is probably a priority. It's really fascinating to hear Christian talk about a 4-part model. We use there's an Indigenous model of mental health in New Zealand called We built a series of training around the wellness response for our people around the 4-part model, which is similar, very similar to what you discussed. And we just hopefully make sure we embed that as a way of encouraging our people. We learned a lot about male mental health and mental health in general during our break that we want to embed as a learning, and just that empathetic leadership style, understanding people are people, but not assets, is a really important thing to take forward too. And hopefully that's where we'll end up as a business, a little bit more of an empathetic leadership group in my team anyway. It's, I guess, the main thing.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Ian. And I'm sure that your US counterparts could probably look into some of those methodologies as well at the moment.
Yeah, well, we learned a little bit from the US. So during the break, we had a podcasting thing. We reached out to quite a few police sites in the US we did some connections with. And the other great learning, I think, sorry to cut over you, Ben, is just how shared the experience was. So everyone's got the same issues in my business. You go wide enough and you use networks, you get a lot of, there's a lot of comfort to be had under pressure as a leader, reaching out to colleagues around the globe and just see how common the experience is in any community, any setting, particularly for my business. I think such a common held set of stress. So that was really beneficial too.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing, Ian. Look, there is a question, and I think you've hit the nerve, Christian, with some org psychs out there today. You talked about measurement, and I guess the question really is around what are some of the key metrics or measures that you're looking at now, and maybe in 6 months' time, what will you be looking back to see whether or not you have managed this effectively, or some of those success measures throughout this period?
Yeah, great question, and an evolving one, to be honest. We are thinking through the various ways in which we can measure, because it does depend a lot on how much the business picks up and where, because I think one of the difficulties on the point specifically on training is that we are inviting folks to join these e-learning courses that aren't in their normal way of operating. They're not in their normal jobs, really, because of all of the restrictions. I mean, whether that's the on-site staff, whether that's our corporate staff, whether that's our real estate brokers and leasing agents, it's a changed dynamic. So teasing out the influence of the context versus the influence of the training is really, really difficult. So we're putting a lot of thought into that, and it does depend a little bit on the timing. One aspect we're definitely taking a real close look at is employee engagement. So we're measuring that more frequently and in more detail than we have previously, and that's through survey methodology and using obviously consistent questions and tracking trends and progress over time, how that's affecting different groups, whether there's any gender differences, for example. And in terms of things like generational differences, a lot of our research, surprisingly enough, indicates that it's the millennial generation that are finding the disruption to the workplace most challenging. I say that's unexpected because you typically associate that generation with highly tech savvy, highly mobile, highly flexible, and so on. I think all that is true, but I also think the ways of working are such that when you're new to career, actually you benefit a lot from, in particular, those that you work with to coach you, to give you feedback, to give you training and development kind of on the job, as it were. But also, and particularly in Asia, where on average, household sizes, as in the physical size of a house, is a lot smaller than it is in Australia and New Zealand, higher density living, and much more likely to have multiple generations in the same household. So parents and grandparents living with their working age children means that actually working from home is not as easy, and it means that the office and coming to work is an extension of the social life and the personal life, and that's being a little bit lost at the moment. So we're being thoughtful about that. Now, all those things are difficult to measure. We are thinking, as I said, more about survey methodology at the moment, and then keeping our eye on as folks come back to kind of regular patterns of work. So, for example, you can probably tell I'm still working from home. Our entire Singapore operation is still working from home and will be at least for the next few weeks as well. And therefore, we're sort of watching with anticipation about when we can start measuring things like behaviour change and transfer of learning.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing. Look, I'm very mindful of time. As I said, we're extremely grateful to have 3 thought leaders with us today, sharing their insights around what has been, what continues to be a major response, and what the transition to this new norm looks like for thought leaders and the organisations that they lead. Look, Jill Fairweather, Head of L&D for WesTrac, thank you very, very much for your time today. Ian Saunders, General Manager, Training, Acting and Registered Psychologist and Detective for NZ Police Force, thank you so much. And Christian Frederickson, Head of HR, Project Development Services for Asia Pacific for JLL. A huge thank you on behalf of the OPRA team and everyone who's attended today. A very, very genuine thank you. In response, OPRA will reach out to each of the 3 of you and identify a local charity of choice, and we'll donate to that particular charity on your behalf as a way of saying thank you virtually. If there's another way of giving you a round of applause virtually today, and I'm sure there is, but my technical developments are still underway. But look, guys, thank you very, very much for your insights and sharing. Anyone on the audience today, if you do have any questions, please field them through. We would encourage you to go to the OPRA website where there are some very useful resources for you as an individual, your family, but also your organisation, and feel free to use those. Thank you very much for everyone attending. Jill, Ian, Christian, thank you so much. And to everyone, have a great day.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks.
You guys.